it's important in our industry is not realizing there are things you don't know, and being open to learning and being open to accepting that maybe you're wrong, or your view or your particular technique can be improved upon by someone else, or someone else's opinion, or someone else's knowledge. And I think the world in general has become more and more insular in terms of what we believe, and that's the way it is. So I think it carries over to a number of different industries. Hopefully that will change eventually back to maybe a little more open-minded approach.
Also, I think it was more cooperative back then. I don't think it was as competitive. It was competitive, but it was more cooperative. I mean, as you know, I worked at Lyric. I was in New York. You're on the other coast, so there was a lot of people on both stuff, and we had this contact with all of these people that came through our environment, and some of them made competing products, but it wasn't as tribal and as kind of, I think, cutthroat as it is today. I mean, people would, appreciate whether, I'll use just a name. It's like, Harry was a mentor of mine, but like, from Arnie Udell or John Dahlquist or Bill Johnson or Lou Johnson and Bill Conrad and on and on and on and on, these people would come through and listen. And I think that they gave their experience, gave their knowledge, and also there was an exchange of knowledge. It was sort of like, wow, that's really cool what this guy is doing. And he's really managed to get this and this that we didn't have before, And I know that the business has become worldwide, and back then it wasn't really. There wasn't that much European and Asian influence in the high end. That doesn't mean it didn't exist. It just wasn't here. Okay, and obviously now it does. But I find that kind of missing, and I find I hate using this word, but it's true, the tribalism of what's going on today kind of sad, because it prevents people from learning by thinking that they already know it and they're not open-minded to change.
Yeah.
I guess you run into that too, because when a guy calls you up, a lot of people think they already got it, and so, but my question would be, well, why are you calling me?
Well, I think, a lot of people that call me know they don't, and so they're calling me because they do realize that they need some help doing this. And maybe it's out of frustration, maybe it's out of realization that they just don't know, so they just want some help. It's one of the, I'm not really sure how to put this. I don't do any marketing at all. I guess part of the reason for that is either someone really wants to know how to improve things, and they don't really want these answers pushed upon them. And by marketing, I mean, I can tell people kind of what I do, but I'm also not trying to say my way is the highway or my way is the only way.
Right.
I can certainly help people, but I think audiophiles will, or my experience has been audiophiles will always be a bit more accepting of what it is that I do when they come to me. I'm not really sure, I'm not putting this correctly.
Well, I agree. We've gotten this divide where, people think that, sadly, I think, and unfortunate in some other ways, that they think they already got it and they don't want to learn. And I just never really understood that. I mean, in all the things that I've done that I have some degree of passion for, whether it's cooking or golf or sports, I learned really early on that I don't know it all. I'm far from knowing it all. And like, at some point in time, if you can let this defense mechanism down, your enjoyment for the things that you do really comes up.
It does. For me, it's important that for every job I do, whether it's the simplest job I have or the most complex job, if I don't learn something new on every job or something that further helps me improve what I do, the job just is not successful for me. And I think ultimately isn't for my client either, because every job is different. And it's important that I'm able to kind of expand and be flexible in terms of how and what I do in every single job, because no two jobs are the same, and every client is different. So if I'm dealing with someone in Cyprus, that's a long way away from Southern California, which is a long way away from Bangkok, which is a long way away from Bordeaux. They're all so different people, and they have such different experiences and what their expectations are, that if I don't learn and expand and grow and be flexible every job, I don't know how I would do my job.
You have an infinite number of variables. There's so much, you can't know every piece of equipment on the planet. It's impossible.
No.
And then the relationships of those pieces, well, you may have done a Wilson speaker here, but you didn't do it with this amplifier and this turntable and this
Right.
lock and these cables.
That room.
Or bad room, right? Yeah. And most of the rooms I work in are not great rooms. I mean, I've set up a pair of Wilson Master Chronosonics in the bottom of a canal boat in Bangkok. I mean, my gosh, Norm Varney would go crazy, but seeing this huge speakers inside this little teeny tiny bottom of the canal boat, wow, that was challenging. And I had to rethink and kind of reevaluate everything I know about setting up a Wilson loudspeaker, getting those to work as they should in that room. And of course, one could argue that they never would work like that to their ultimate expression in that environment. And there's truth to that, but that's really not the point of why my client owns those and enjoys them. And he does thoroughly enjoys them. So.
Well, now I'm going to ask you a question that is a little bit tricky, okay? Because some people say that the difficulty when optimizing a room can be the size of the room, or it could be if you have the right components or the right bass traps. But some other people think that is the wife acceptance factor that comes into play. Is that something true for you?
Which part?
The part that a wife says, yeah, oh, that's very pretty, that with the place you put the speakers, but I want them next to the fireplace or something like that.
I would say 80% of the time.
Seriously, girls out there, please don't do that. Okay?
Well, but for a lot of, it's true. A lot of my clients have a bespoke room where it's just a sound room. And for me, it's a little bit sad because they have this beautiful room they had this big investment in, and there's one chair. And it's for one person, right? And many times when I get finished with my job and in situations like that, they ask me, well, what do you think is the next thing I should do? I say, well, buy a love seat at least. Your wife can come in and listen to music with you. But a lot of times it is a matter of integrating a music system into a home. And it's not just a stereo system for a guy, it's a music system for a family. Or if he's the predominant listener, it still has to be integrated into the living space of the family. So that's where it becomes really critical for me to be flexible and for me to be really think about how can I best integrate the system and pull out all the tricks I know to window out the room and use the room where I can to my benefit with whatever I have to work with. And some rooms are very well treated, some rooms are not well treated, some rooms are over treated. So it's a very challenging part of my job, actually, Veronica, because I do try and get the very best out of my client systems, but sometimes it's just not possible to completely optimize them. And they understand that. But importantly, it's a compromise that we come to together. It's not something I just do and say, I can't go any further. So typically what I'll do is if there is a specific boundary, for example, in a room, I'll have the the family or the couple or whoever, tape off the space where I have available to work with and say, give me my footprint, if you will.
Okay.
And I can work in this footprint, and then I won't come out of it, I promise. Or if I have to come out of it, I'll show you what happens when I do, and then you can make the decision. So it's a very important part of my job, actually, and it's not one that I take lightly, and it's not one I'm frustrated by. It's just something that is part of integrating an audio system into someone's home. So it's not a recording studio.
I'm surprised to hear that in a way, because I would think that somebody that would call you would want to let you do your thing. But we all face that. I mean, I've gone through many places where you go through this whole process for a customer to buy, let's say, a pair of speakers, and you go there and they want you to set them up. But when you get there, it's like, well, it can't go there and it can't go here. You can only have it this far from the wall, and it's only can be this far from the couch. And it's kind of limiting to what you can do. And like a lot of times I try to show people, like, if you move your chair back just another foot, listen to how much different the bass sounds or whatever it is, but you can't do it. So, it is a challenge, and I certainly appreciate, I'm surprised that you run into it as much, but I appreciate the fact that you have to deal with it.
Well, yeah, and a lot of it does, how I deal with it, a lot of it is actually dealt with in my conversations I have with my clients prior to ever visiting them. So when I go into someone's home, it is really a known entity to me already. I know exactly what I'm walking into, because the last thing I want to do is walk into a landmine, and because that doesn't do me any good. It doesn't do the client any good. It's expensive for them to have me there. So I want to make sure that they can maximize their investment in me. Right. So it's important that I know everything I can possibly know about their system. And that includes, Veronica, where can't I work? What can't I do? What are the limitations? Because really, I mean, every system has limitations. Even in the most elaborate bespoke rooms, there are limitations to that as well. And so it's just a matter of which limitations are we talking about.
Stirling, so I'm sure you've probably done this with a lot of people. Who would you like to collaborate with, and why?
I think I would like to collaborate with a recording engineer.
You can come to Boston.
Yeah, based on what the minutia that I understand in terms of getting something set up properly for an audio system, I would like to bring that to a recording process and see what happens when we apply those sorts of things to what a recording engineer does. And I know a lot of recording engineers, I mean, they're all extraordinarily professional, and they know their craft backwards and forwards, and they're all really great at what they do. And I'm really not a believer in there being very, very many bad recordings. I think recording engineers generally do a really great job. Some of them do a better job than others, obviously. But when an audio system is set up properly, they all sound pretty darn good. But I would like to take some of the things that I bring to setup and apply them to, I'm not even sure what it would be, because I don't know what it would be. I'd like to learn from them, but it would be fun to collaborate with someone making a recording and asking them to be flexible in terms of how they do things based on what I intuit might improve things. So, and it could lead to nothing, or it could be fun. I'm not sure.
Well, as you know, Alan Parsons is going to be the face of Munich. And I'm a big Alan Parsons fan. Maybe we can see if we can find him when we're there and throw this at him and see what he has to say.
That'd be fun. There's a guy that has a recording studio up in Whitefish, Montana, and Brett Allen. He has a place called Snow Ghost Music, and it's a great recording venue. He's got unbelievable equipment list there. He uses big Wilsons and got a beautiful Neve board there, and he's someone that I would love to work with on a recording, for example.
Have you approached him? Do you know him?
I know him, and we just never seem to have the time to do it.
I would think somebody near you also, maybe Cookie would be open to.
Or Piper Payne. Piper would be fun to work with.
in your area.
I know Piper pretty well, and she's super busy. I don't know Cookie, but yeah, somebody like that would be really fun to listen to. So it would probably be something like a recording engineer.
Sterling, what do you think is the biggest myth in audio?
That measurements are everything.
Uh-huh.
And
I agree.
and I guess my point there is that measurements certainly matter, because I think ultimately we can measure everything, but I don't think we have the ability to measure everything yet. And then there's also the X factor of someone's brain. You know, our brains are not, they're perception mechanisms, and they take in data and they process it in ways that a microphone can't, or a series of microphones can't, or just something that's recording a sound is just a recording device. It's not taking into account, it's not analyzing, if you will. And that's what our brains do. So our brains bring to the party something very different than just measurements. So it's important that, in my opinion, it's important that we take into account many things that are other than just measurements. And there seems to be a crowd out there that's, if you can't measure it, it's not valid. And I don't think that's necessarily a great way of looking at making, reproducing music in the home. So I think that's a myth.
So this, I know, is a hard question. Everybody's had difficulty with it, but I'll ask it anyway. You get to listen to one last piece of music and have one last great meal. What are you eating and what are you listening to?
Kind of blue and Japanese food.
Oh, so you got it right away.
Easy for me.
Sterling, where do you see your company and yourself in 5 years?
That's something I've been thinking about a lot lately. As I get older, it's more and more difficult for me to do my job, just because it's physically very demanding. As Elliot knows, he's seen me working in jobs before, and it's physically very demanding, and it's mentally demanding as well. So I would really love to find someone that can kind of take over for me. You know, what I do is not, I'm not selling a product. I don't sell any products. I just have me and my service. So where do I want my company to be? I started the company with trying to provide a model, if you will, for people to follow on and do this as a profession. I tried to create a pricing structure and a structure of best practices, and how to treat a client properly, and to build a model, if you will, for people to follow and say, if I do these things my own way, but if I do these things this way, someone's already gone and established it as a valid way of making money and being a professional, not professional, but
like a certification.
Yeah, I wish there were something like certification, but I'm not sure how we would do that. I'm not qualified to do that, but
I think you're putting yourself down. I think you are. The reality is that they do that for video, okay?
Sure.
And they've had classes, and that person I've known for a very, very long time, and was a close friend of mine in New York, and he's managed to do it. I think that it's not a bad idea. I'm not sure exactly, but perhaps if you could make a series of videos, for example, of your process. You know, you start with a blank room and start with the process. And obviously you can't address every single little thing that you do, because as you said, every customer wants different stuff, but a high percentage of best practices. In other words, how do you place a speaker in a room? Where should you sit in the room? What are the other important factors in addressing equipment or cables, or the putting them together, or electricity, or whatever you find important, and put them in a series of, for lack of a better word, lessons or tutorials or whatever. I mean, people give classes and all kinds of different things. I mean, I started playing poker 5, 6, 7 years ago, and I don't really do it much anymore because I find it takes too much of my time, and it is exhausting, focusing for 8 and 9 and 10 hours at a time. But there are dozens of guys that give classes, and it helps somebody really dramatically move. I never believed in golf fitting or golf lessons until I did it, and wow, it really made a huge difference in what I was capable of doing from me, not watching, Jason Day or Phil Mickelson or Tiger, because that's them. But how can I address this to myself? So I think you could do it. And I think that maybe this would only get people a partial way there, but 80 or 90% down the path is better than nothing, I think.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people would appreciate it. That's just my opinion.
Well, that's true. I think it's great for consumers. I would really love to be able to have someone else do what I'm doing on a global basis. There are other people that do this around the country. I think every market has kind of a setup guy, that they go to. But taking on a global basis, a global context, if you will, was my vision for Audio Systems Optimized, and it's worked out. I travel all over the world doing this, and in 2019, I traveled almost 200,000 miles doing this.
Couldn't you do an apprenticeship for that? Couldn't you find somebody, let's say, in Asia or in Europe or in a couple of people in the United States and one in South America?
I've been looking for someone, and the problem is, and maybe I'm just not looking at this clearly enough, but the problem is that the experience base is pretty large. I come into this with over 40 years of experience, so
Sure.
I know how solid state amps work, and tube amps, and single-ended tube amps, and OTL amplifiers, and planar magnetics, and electrostatics, and all the different kind of speakers. And you have to have a basic understanding of all of these things kind of work and fit in or don't fit in terms of when you get into someone's home, how am I going to make this work, right? And so the experience base of understanding at least the very basics of all of these different design types is daunting without time and experience. So it's
well, let's give, is it a teachable skill?
Sure. I mean, I learned it.
Right.
Well,
you learned a long time. You learned it over 40 years in experience. My point is,
it took a long time.
Take an apprentice, okay, and teach him or her. Obviously, this wouldn't happen in a week or a month. I mean, you'd have to have somebody as an apprentice or an assistant or whatever word you want to call it to begin with to travel
Sure.
and study with you. I don't think it's an impossible task. It's, we've talked about this a little too. I think that a lot of what happens in audio today lacks the perspective of history. Okay. And so you and I are old enough to be fortunate that we have come through this process, and we've seen high-end audio at its very early stages in the 60s and 70s and 80s and things like that, where there was a lot more discovery process coming and a lot less I think a lot less science, to be honest with you. I think that there was always the measurement crowd, but most of the original guys or the early guys were more, I'm not saying they didn't have engineering or expertise, but they were more of the, I hate this word, but I'm going to use it, the tinkering variety, okay, who realized that, gee, this doesn't sound good, and there's no way I can tell why it doesn't sound good from measurements, so I got to start screwing around with it to see if I can figure it out. Okay.
Yeah, and I do think it would be wonderful if we could have more of both working together.
Yeah.
The idea of a certification, Veronica, is a great idea. I would be wonderful if it could be industry sponsored, because I think it would do the industry as a whole a tremendous amount of good. Since I don't sell anything, a lot of manufacturers don't know, I'm not trying to take credit for this, but don't know what I do for them. Because I'll recommend that if I go and I work with someone, a client of mine, and then we kind of further expand their system or a trajectory, if you will, for where they take their system, they buy a lot of equipment after I see them, you know, and but they do it in a very methodical, educated, knowledgeable, and excited way. They don't do it out of frustration. And that's great. That's good for the industry, in my opinion. And if the industry as a whole took set it more seriously, if you will, and not make it about the product exclusively, I think the industry would be better off. As a manufacturer, I understand their point of view because everybody wants their product to be easy to use, easy to set up. You put it in the system and boom, 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 it works. It's great. But that's not the way it is. So I do think an industry-sponsored sort of certification program would be really a great thing for the industry to look into. I don't know how that would happen because we're a bunch of individuals.
My company,
No.
you know, when I talked about this, my company was big enough, I would be more than happy to participate. And if I get to the point where it's large enough that I financially can do it, I would. I think that the reason that we have a lot of, not everyone, but a lot of dissatisfied people is the fact that they're, to quote Peter Green, they're searching for mysteries without any clues.
Yeah, Rocky, you were going to say something? I'm sorry.
Oh, well, I was just going to suggest to speak with the people of the High-End Society in Munich. Now, that's an international society, but whatever would be the
It needs to
equivalent
be
in
international.
America, right? Whatever could be the equivalent in America, that could be like an industry push to get this into something that can be put into practice.
Yeah.
And what in the meantime, I think that it's a great idea to let everybody know that you are doing a work for the manufacturers, a great job, because you are actually allowing people in the room to listen to what they acquired. So because there's always like a gap between what they buy and what they're listening to. And many people complain, is I can listen to it the way I did it in the listening room of my dealer, or whatever I listened to it, or whatever I imagine, or the reviewer said about it. And so you're actually doing a great service for many manufacturers, and you're agnostic. So I think that it really deserves to be put out there. And if you have already a method that is working, so you hit the nail on the head when you said that it's a lot to do with how you interact with the customer in the previous interview and how you can put yourself in the position of the customer. So you're not just a person with a computer going there and say, hey, listen, I don't care what you're listening to, but I'm going to listen to your equipment. And now you have this graph and you have this other graph. And then, and people just get more confused, more anxious because they are not trusting what they're listening to with whatever the numbers are in the graph. And I'm not diminishing the importance of measurement. I'm just saying it's not the only thing.
Right. No, I agree. It is very important. And yeah, I had something I wanted to say and I forgot it.
While you're thinking, okay, I think that the industry has become too commoditized and too product oriented. And I'll give you an example from another part of my life, which I've been playing golf for a really long time. And golf was primarily something that people bought stuff from advertisements. You know, you see Jack Nicklaus played with it, or Arnold Palmer, or Tiger, and you see it on TV. And you'd go to a golf store and they'd have a whole bunch of things, and people swing the club and they buy it. Okay. And part of what I learned about golf is you see people go to the driving range and they hit the same bad shot 100 times, and all they're really doing is reinforcing the mistake that they're making. The golf industry changed, I'm not sure exactly how many years ago, and I'm not really counting, but I finally decided that I was going to follow some of the information that I read, and I went out and got a professional fitting, where I went to somebody to get a set of clubs to help me with my golf game based on what I do and not on some advertising or pricing or anything else like that. And I was amazed, to be honest with you. I was amazed. The first place I went, I didn't like as much as I had it done again. And I found somebody else that I liked, but I was really amazed at how different my abilities became when I was using equipment that was actually set up for this, old guy. Okay. And my frustration level dropped dramatically because all of a sudden I was starting to be able to do much more consistently what I thought I would do. My point of that, bringing it back to audio, is I think it's disappointing, the overall service entity of the industry. And I'm not putting to put anybody down. I realize these are really difficult things to do, and customers a lot of times don't want them and they don't want to pay for them. But the industry has become very much a commodity that I saw this box, I want to buy this box. Where can I buy the box? How do I get the box at the best deal or the best price? And yet the end result seems to have been pushed on the priority scale, not at the top anymore, but further down the list at some point.
Yeah, and the conundrum is, that, because the industry has become so product oriented, we have amazing products now.
Absolutely.
When I'm in the field and I work with the products that are available to me now, I am blessed that I get to do what I do in today's market, because the tools I have to work with in doing what I do with my clients own are phenomenal. I mean, I can't believe how good some of this stuff is. I'm getting levels of performance I never ever thought I would achieve from an audio system. Remarkably like music, live music. I mean, wow. But the problem is that for me to do that, it really stresses my abilities to pull that out of the systems. My point is that we're making these more and more remarkable products. We're getting these tremendous advances, not only in analog and digital, but speaker design, everything, understanding of acoustics. And because the stuff is so high in performance level, it makes the job of setup all that more difficult, because there's more to achieve and there's more to go down, there's more to pull apart, there's more to tease out of something that requires just such tiny little incremental changes in some aspect of the system. It's not tweaking, it's actually revealing information, but knowing how to do it and where to do it is the hard part. And I'm learning more and more every time I do a job, because I'm getting to work with more and more sophisticated equipment as it comes out from the marketplace. So how do we teach that? I'm not sure, Veronica. I would love to be able to come up with a methodology, or someone who is a qualified teacher and putting together curriculum to do that. It does need to be a global endeavor, because the mistakes that my clients make in Bangkok and anywhere else in the world are exactly the same mistakes that people make in Des Moines, Iowa. It's all the same. They all have the same problems, and maybe their environments are a little bit different, so the solutions are a little bit different, and maybe there are different priorities in different marketplaces, but they're all the same problems, and so it does need to be an international endeavor. And I'm not sure how we're going to do that, but I do think it needs to be. Do you think it needs to be done?
Maybe we can talk about this over a bottle of wine or two in Munich. And
That sounds like a plan.
Yeah.
Well, this has been a pleasure, and I feel like I learned so much. Thank you very much, Sterling, for being with us in this very interesting interview. Thank you, Elliot, and thanks everybody who was
Thank
watching.
you, Veronica. It's very nice to meet you.
Thank
And
you.
thank you for your questions. Thanks, Elliot. It's great to see you. And I guess we'll be seeing you next week. But
Sterling, thanks for your time. I hope everybody enjoyed this as much as I did. I think that this is an area that I felt my whole life, that just wasn't addressed enough. And I think that so many people want to get from point A to point B and just have troubles doing it. And it's no different than, any other business. I mean, to sum it up, I mean, anybody can buy a Porsche. It doesn't mean you can drive a race car. They're two different things. And so at some level, I think I agree with you that, not at some level, at every level, I think the audio gear today is incredible. And I think that has been for a long time. It's not like,
Absolutely.
there's been great stuff. We've had advances and the evolution of audio, as I like to call it, because it's not revolutionary, it's evolutionary. It's been changing ever since I've been around. And, we've had an advance here and advance here and going and going and going. And it's just getting better and better and better. And of course, the knowledge and the ability to assemble these things and to work on acoustics and placement is better, but it's just not 100% organized yet, so that we can make it more enjoyable for everyone.
Right. So
I agree.
hopefully we can do that one day.
Out.
Well, everybody watching, please like and subscribe and hit the bell, and see us next time for another episode of Inside Designer Studio. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.